Tere, ilusat pärastlõunat ja tere hommikust ja tere
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning from Tallinn, from Rocket 69 studio. My name is Silver Tambur. I'm the co-founder and editor-in-chief of the English online publication Estonian World. The publication writes about Estonia. Today we have a beautiful afternoon here in Tallinn, and I'm really delighted to welcome all the Estonians and friends of Estonia watching on from across the world. This is a virtual forum for Estonians across the world taking place for the third time, and the duration of it will be up to 2 hours today. The forum can also be watched at the Facebook page of the Estonian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and its YouTube channel, and also on the portals of the Public Broadcasting and Estonian World. And you can also choose the English and Russian interpretation if you need that. All of you who wish to send any comments or any questions in to the speakers of the forum, you can log on to the official broadcasting platform of our event that you can find at www.workshop.com. You will find the address on the bottom of the screen together with the ID of today's event, Estonians Forum 05/05/2022, and you can also find the participation link from the Facebook page of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs or from the website of the Ministry. Some more details if you open up the agenda in the workshop environment, which you can find in the upper right-hand corner. Then you can find the details with each block of the agenda. You can find detailed information on the panelists, and also you can find the Q&A section, so you can post your questions there throughout the forum. Should we have any more questions than we are able to answer to, you will find answer to these questions in the Global Estonians newsletter published by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and it will be published on the 16th of May. Briefly about today's program, we will have a diverse program. To start with, we will hear the welcoming words from the Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Estonia, Mrs. Eva-Maria Liimets. Then we will have a discussion on the security situation in Europe through the eyes of Estonia, how protected is the state of Estonia. The participants are Jonatan Vseviov, Kolga and Ilmar Tamm. And after that, we will hear a wonderful piece of music from the singer-songwriter, composer and musician Kalkun, followed by the discussion, what is the benefit of Estonia for an Estonian abroad. And in this discussion, there will be Mr. Luukas Kristjan Ilves, Mr. Erlich, and Mrs. Hellika Kirt. And this discussion will be followed by a conversation with the President, Mrs. Kersti Kaljulaid, and we will discuss with her the global situation of Estonians and the related challenges, joys, and future. Now I'm delighted to hand the floor over to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mrs. Eva-Maria Liimets, that has worked at the ministry since 1997 in different positions, including in the embassies in Washington and Rome. And in 2014 to 2015, she worked as a chief consul at the main consulate of Estonia in New York. And between the years 2017 to 2021, she worked as an ambassador for the Republic of Estonia in Prague. She has graduated from public administration from the Tartu University and also defended her master's thesis in Estonian Business School. The floor is yours. Dear Estonians across the world, dear promoters of Estonian identity, protectors of Estonian language and culture, hello to all the Estonian houses, Estonian homes, Estonian schools, and Estonian societies. Hello to everybody that you have joined us in order to have a heated discussion on the challenges facing us, starting from security to the e-state of Estonia. Each and everyone's opinion matters. I'm really delighted to spend a couple of hours with you already for the third time at this virtual forum. On the 24th of February this year, I was in Ukraine to celebrate this important festivity for Estonians together with the local Estonians and Friends of Estonia, but unfortunately plans had to be changed because in the morning of that day, Russia started the illegal and unfounded war against Ukraine. The Russian armed forces attacked Kiev and other Ukrainian cities, and since that day, Europe has been facing a fully fledged war. This is another human tragedy. I would like to emphasize that Estonia categorically condemns the Russian aggression against Ukraine, and the Russian army is committing war crimes and crimes against humanity in Ukraine. And the leaders of Russia have made statements that refer to the goal of eliminating the nation and the state of Ukraine. In this war, we have seen clear evidence of genocide, and this is also expressed by the 21st of April declaration adopted by the Parliament of Estonia. Thanks to our history, we understand the sufferings of Ukrainians, and all the Estonians have gathered and shoulder to shoulder supported Ukraine and helped as much as they could, both in Estonia and all in many Estonian communities across the world. Here in Estonia, we felt a sense of belonging, a sense of cohesion when the war broke out, and we don't remember such a sense since the days of the Singing Revolution. We also felt that the Estonian people in many countries of the world are thinking in the same manner and feeling in the same manner. I would like to thank all of you for your kind-heartedness and determination. Estonia will leave this crisis as a strong, mature, responsible, and European country that is a role model for others, and a nation that is a role model, and we all play a part in that. I call upon all of you to return to Estonia after all these years of the pandemic, to visit your close ones and friends, and also discover the beautiful Estonia. Come and see the famous Viking exhibition in the island of Saaremaa, or the treasures in the Estonian National Museum in Tartu. Also go to the city of Narva that has a very active cultural life, or enjoy the smoke sauna in between the forests of southern Estonia. These are just a couple of nations. Dear listeners, I'm really delighted to see that many youngsters living abroad and originally from Estonia have decided to improve their ties with their country of origin. Since assuming office, I have really found it very important that Estonia would increase the opportunities for participating in Estonian language and cultural events for the youngsters living abroad. Once again, we have dozens of youngsters coming to Estonia this summer for the Estonian language camp in the center part of Estonia. Also, the youngsters made great use of the grants that they could have their internships in Estonia, and this was the opportunity offered by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs this year for the first time. And soon we will open an annual round of scholarships for the youngsters who wish to continue their education in some university or vocational school. You are always welcome in Estonia. I'm also happy to say that Estonians are doing great things abroad as well, and it has all got into full swing after the end of the limitations, after the end of COVID-19, be it the Cultural Days in New York or the fancy parties in Australia or the Toronto Estonia Centre. I wish you a fruitful discussion. Long live Estonia.
Thank you very much. We now continue with the first round of discussion where we talk about the situation of security. So we talk about this across the world, but especially we are concerned about our region. And Estonians living elsewhere is actually more worried about how our state is doing. So this is what we're discussing during the next panel. How well defended is the Estonian state? We have invited here Jonatan Vseviov, Margus Kolga and Ilmar Tamm. Jonatan Vseviov is Deputy Secretary of Estonian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and he has worked in the Ministry of Defense and has been our ambassador in the United States. He has graduated from the University of Tartu and also cum laude from the Security Studies of Georgetown University. And Margus Kolga has joined us across video. He's a journalist, politologist, a filmmaker, human rights activist who was born in Canada in a family of Estonians. And he's a founder of Disinfo Watch and a senior fellow of MacDonald-Laurier Institute and CDA Institute. And he ran the campaign for Magnitsky Act and is continuing his work to support the activists across the world. Markus is commenting on foreign policy and human rights topics, and his articles has been published by The Globe and Mail, Toronto Star, National Post, and the EU Observer. And actually, to know that Kremlin also added Markus Kolga in March to their list of sanctions. We have invited here also the Brigadier General Ilmar Tamme, who is the chief of the Baltic Defense College. Previously, he has been the chief of the Defense Forces and the head of a NATO Cyber Cooperation Center, and has also worked in Germany and communication department in Afghanistan. So he's had an international career. But I would like to start with you, Markus. I would use your first name because we have known each other for years. So, Markus, actually, you're the one who actually lives in Toronto. So, therefore, you represent one of the largest communities abroad, and you are an active member of an Estonian community. You have been very active for years, and you have been quite concerned when you've been commenting and monitoring all the situation, all the things which had to do with Russia. So what's the view from Toronto? What do you think of our security situation now? Thank you very much, Silver, and I would like to thank you for your work in Estonian World to inform Estonians across the world and to inform our friends who do not speak Estonian but speak English. From a Canadian point of view, Estonia is definitely defended, but from the same point of view, it is important to understand that these threats are changing and increasing. And I think in the context of the Western world, the war in Ukraine has helped people to understand how realistic is the threat of Russia to the eastern members of NATO. Because before it was a sort of distant and abstract, then it's no longer so, because the Russian government and military criminal activities which the Canadian government last week called a genocide, is something which is in the news every week, where Putin has tried to break down the Western allies for 15 years now, but now he has motivated us to rethink it. And we have become closer in our policies. Estonian government has done a lot of very good work. All the NATO allies can be grateful. When it comes to strategic communication, Estonia has been very strong because the Prime Minister has been visible in more important media publications, and her message is very clear. The government has understood that they need to find a balance, because on one hand, there is a clear message that Estonia is secure, but the threat from Kremlin is constant and increasing. The government of Estonia has made a decision to invest in defense, and that's been mentioned. In my own media interviews in Canada, I have compared the Estonian contribution with the Canadian contribution. I have said Estonia, where the population is about the same as an average sized town like Calgary, has contributed more than all of Canada. And I think this influenced Canadian decision 2 weeks ago to add 500 million to the budget this year for military aid for Ukraine. Estonian reputation has improved a great deal, and I believe that the Estonian contribution is an example. When it comes to the Russian information war in the context of Ukraine, then it has concerned the Ukrainians living abroad and Estonian community. When it comes to the attack, it's based on the false narrative that Ukraine is led by Nazi government, and that the Ukrainian Jewish president is a Nazi. This has been a narrative by the Russian embassy in order to silence Estonians, Latvians, Lithuanians, and Ukrainians in Canada, because our people here have been attacked to the same narrative. I'm being attacked by the same narrative. They're very active. They're calling journalists They're doing it through proxies. So this is a very great danger. And in Canada here, we have been able to influence the Canadian policy regarding Ukraine because we've had close cooperation between the Central and Eastern European communities. In 2008, we we compiled a council where it was possible to make our voices heard. And we have 4.5 million supporters. We have some in the United States as well, but I think this should be done in every active country in order to support Estonian security. This is it. Thank you very much, Markus, and we'll continue with Jonatan Vseviov. So you have worked in the Ministry of Defense, in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, you've been ambassador to the United States, and you have a very good understanding regarding how this looks in Estonia, what's the national view and what's the international view. So what would you say, how well defended is Estonia? Estonia is very well defended, but first of all, I'd like to thank you for this opportunities to talk to you all. And Margus Kolga, is a pleasure to hear, not only that he says the right thing, but also he's very resounding in his message, because it's important for us to know that our message is amplified not by only our officers and prime ministers and state officials, but also Estonians across the world. So thank you, Margus, for what you're doing to spread this message. Estonia is well defended, but it does not mean that the threats to the Estonian or European security will be diminished. It is a very serious time. There is war in Europe, and this is not a small war. It's a second largest war after the Second World War would have seen, and it will probably last for a while, and it's not unlikely that it even actually gets worse. We will win this war. And when we say we're not talking about Estonia and not only the Ukraine alone, but we're talking about the Western world, this part of our planet, which values these principles, which the European security has been built on. Every country has a right to exist. Every nation has a right to be a nation. So you cannot use aggression to change the borders. And these principles have held, although they've been under attack. And today, one of the big countries in the world, nuclear countries, and members of the security country, not only has betrayed but attacked these principles. Therefore, it's not only attack against Ukraine, but it's also attack against these principles. Russia and President Putin personally made it very crystal clear for us last year when the Western attempt to negotiate, he answers with his drafts which he tabled. These are the contracts which mentioned Ukraine, but mostly he wanted to turn back the time, coming back to the spheres of influence and regaining control over Eastern Europe. And this means the same principle that every state and every nation has a right to exist. He wants to turn it back to the 19th century or early 20th century. This will not pass. We do not agree. And we can overcome it only if we are increasing the price of aggression for the aggressor. We will keep raising it as long as we need so that he would stop or he'll be no longer able or willing to maintain the aggression. So therefore we have the sanctions, political isolation, all these other messages which the West is saying is aimed to increase the cost of aggression. We also have to help Ukraine. We have to have the material assistance, also the civil aid Estonia and other countries have offered. But in addition to that, it is also as important to have political support or support for Ukraine so that they would maintain hope to restore peace and also bring their country to where they want to be, to Europe. So this hope is a resource which cannot be measured in numbers, but what is critically important. And Estonia works for that aim so that NATO and the EU door would be open for Ukraine and the path to that would survive. And third, we have to improve our own collective defense and NATO and this unity of West, which is the basis of our security. We can handle it. It doesn't mean campaign is simple, and so far we have been able to maintain unity. There will be some challenges, and these challenges do not come from our own complicated task of maintaining this unity, but Russia is not only bombing Ukrainian cities and committing crimes on the territory of Ukraine, but Russia tries to break our determination, and this is done in three ways. First of all, tries to hurt us so that it'll be unevenly distributed between the different Western countries, so to separate us from each other. Then they would try to scare us, threatening with a nuclear weapon, talking about all sorts of nonsense in the TV in order to paralyze us. And they try to give us false hope, offering all sorts of diplomatic possibilities, talking about some sort of negotiations in order to break our focus. So we need to be able to withstand all this. We have to suffer the pain. We have to show solidarity, helping each other, not being afraid. We do not have to be afraid. And we should not hope the false promises. This is not the different shades of grey. Because if the question is that every country and nation has a right to exist, then there is no in between. It's yes or no. It's binary. So as long as we're able to maintain our understanding and the clarity, not only in Estonia, but across the world, and it's in the public eye, then every Estonian has a critical role to play in order to spread this message. Thank you very much. Ilmar, you have been very active. You are a member of the Defense Forces. And one of the members of the Defense Forces recently said that every missile we can send to the Ukraine means one Russian tank less. So what do you think what the situation is like? Is Estonia defended? Thank you very much for inviting me and allowing me to participate. And maybe sometimes the Defense Force members are using a too complicated language, but the example you gave shows us very clearly where the Estonian defense starts from. I'm very proud to wear the flag of Ukraine on my sleeve. And since I'm responsible for the officer training in the Baltic Defense College, and it's not only Estonians but also Ukrainians who are studying there, who after the February 24th, of course, went back to fight for Ukraine. But at the same time, we understand that the security in Europe today means that they fight means that they're also fighting for our defense and freedom. So all the assistance we can offer, there is no question of why we're doing it. So if we were to ask how well defended Estonia is, then first of all, I would first use the example of Ukraine. We have military capabilities and weaponry. It's important to be determined. There is a will to fight. And when it comes to the Ukrainians, it has really been able to uphold them. So many skeptics who thought that Ukrainians will not last more than a couple of days, they were disappointed or they become embittered, because this is the same thing we see very clearly in Estonia. Because there is an expression in Estonia that the best food for an Estonian is another Estonian. We usually get along well, but sometimes we get into a bit of a fight. But this is the situation where you can see that people get together. There's no question why we have to work together. So the figures which would characterize not the defense forces, but the volunteers, which is the Defense League. So these numbers are increasing, and statistically it has been said that every week we gained over 200 new members. And this is a task for us as well, because if people want to contribute, we need to train them, we need to give them supplies. And I'm very happy that the political leadership we have today have found the military crisis resources to support all these activities. If someone were asking today if Estonia defended, but we are defended, but we want to improve this defense and we want to support Ukrainians so we can win time in order to make it even more efficient. So this was my brief answer.
Now let me continue on your train of thought. As you were mentioning, the number of members of the Defence League has increased in recent times. What can we tell the Estonians abroad when they are thinking about how could they contribute to Estonian security? Do you have a specific recommendation to them? Maybe they could join the Estonian Defence Forces, or there are some other solutions as to how they could participate in the defense and security of Estonia. Yes, things are somewhat easier with the Defence League because there are different formats for being its member. You do not necessarily need to be physically present in Estonia. You can also be a supporting member of the Defence League, and you don't need to be an Estonian citizen to be a supporting person. And we would need to agree on what is the kind of support that is being shown by the person and how could we measure the support in an understandable way so that it would also have a tangible effect. As for the defense forces, then I encourage the youngsters that are abroad. Well, as you know, the Estonian defense forces are based on the reserve armed forces or the defense forces, and conscription is just one way of educating oneself professionally. That the next panel will be about cyber issues. And we are looking for people with respective backgrounds, and we also offer specific opportunities for developing oneself at the defense forces. Or if a person should have management qualities or leadership qualities, they can also test them out and also develop them. So I would say that if it's an easier situation, then based on your previous experience, it wouldn't be that hard at all. I encourage you to join the defense forces, and the limit age is 28, and a 28-year-old person is still a young one. Jonatan, you would like to add something? Yes, I agree with what Ilmar was saying. In addition to that, it is important that people are abreast of things, they are aware, they would spread the understanding, and they would be proud of where they come from. So they would not let shadows and lies take over. Currently, the things that are happening, it is not only important to keep these things in mind, in our minds, but we need to make sure that our neighbors and acquaintances also understand them in a similar way. And it is also equally important not to drown into lies and shadows. Our role is to provide clarity in the world of shadows, and everyone can do their part. Be on top of what is going on. Do not let anyone else pretend as if the things happening in Ukraine right now would only be the problem for Ukraine or the problem for Eastern Europe at its extreme. It is all happening in the middle of Europe, and not only the existence of Ukraine is being under attack, it is our existence as well. Every Estonian across the world, no matter whether they speak Estonian or not, need to spread that message. Thank you, Markus. Actually, Jonatan was referring to the information war. You have dealt with this topic for years already. What do you think? Should it be somewhat easier right now to have the objective message and truth prevail? We can see that in a Western country, people have opened up their eyes when they were shut before. For example, in Germany, we can clearly see how the German media is publicly writing about or openly writing about how They were caught into a trap to some extent by the Russian lobby and Russian interests related to energy and so forth. As for Canada, I know that you have previously written about and talked about certain topics. There have been incidents where the Kremlin narrative has prevailed. I remember there were some, I don't know whether it was posted by you, but there were some incidents where the Russian flags were waving and all kinds of Russian festivities were being celebrated. For years, you have tried to represent the objective narrative there. What do you make of the current information war? History has often been used by the Russian embassy in the context of information war. They have tried to disseminate the respective opinions, for example, denied occupation, and the same applies to the Nazi narrative I was referring to. I must say that, unfortunately, thanks to this truth, we can really burn out these piles of lies. And we can really learn from the real history. I would like to briefly comment on two things. Ilmar was saying that the fight that is being fought in Ukraine is a fight that everyone is fighting or should be fighting. I believe that when we are helping Ukraine, we are also helping Ukraine, Canada and Estonia. And no matter where the Estonians are living, if they can at all, talk to their neighbors, friends, the local media, work together with the local Ukrainian community, support them in order to make sure that the local governments support Ukraine, the Ukrainian refugees with weapons and all other assistance. So this is of utmost importance. So this is our front line. We can all do our part. Secondly, we have this NATO unity that Jonatan was referring to previously. We can also talk to our local friends and acquaintances about NATO, to the local media and our communities, that the Estonian border with Russia is not only Estonia's border with Russia, but it is the border of NATO with Russia. And this is what I keep saying here, that the border of Estonia is also the border for Canada. And Canada needs to defend it together with other NATO allies. We need to support it more, and we need to make sure that our troops are present in the Baltics, in Poland, in the countries of Eastern allies, in order to continue to protect them, and we have done it so far. Now, when you ask me whether Estonia is defended, it absolutely is, but we need to do considerably more work locally in NATO allied countries and elsewhere in order to solidify this unity. Thank you. We have clearly seen that Estonia was well prepared. We can see it objectively. In terms of communication, our messages are passed on, and as I remember, or as I understand, the preparation started in the end of last year. And hereby, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Defense have played a major role. So I think that in terms of communication, our messages get to where they need to get to. Largely, the preparations started 30 years ago, or roughly 30 years ago, when we became free again. For us, there has never been an end in history when it would seem that Russia has changed and there's nothing else to fear. I have always been willing to talk about it. I have always said that the Western needs to have a united front and needs to abide by principles. We cannot disagree on the founding principles. It is always easy to say that the main thing is to avoid war or to achieve peace. But here, the devil is in the details again. When the peace is founded on abolishing all principles, then it is like an agreement that was once agreed in Munich, and it would all lead to a tragedy for all. When it became apparent that Russia plans a massive military attack, then of course we started preparations. For us, it was nothing new that we needed to learn something new for the first time. Currently, we are being listened to more. Our messages are clearer, maybe because we also have the global media reporting on what is actually happening. We can also see what is happening in the towns and villages that have been occupied for a week or two. Once again, we knew about all of that. We have lived through 50 years of occupation. We have had to bear all the crimes, and now the world sees it when they watch the global media. And I repeat Markus Kolga once again here by saying that spreading the message in your close circles, among your friends, neighbors, among your parliamentary representatives or government officials, by showing what is at stake is very important. And the Estonians are providing the amplification for spreading the message, and the official Estonian message would not be as strong as if it were not for the amplification provided by all of you Estonians. Now is the time for questions and answers. And there is one more question that we have received, and if we are unable to answer all of them, we will send you a newsletter. There is a question: how could the people join the Estonian Defence League when they live abroad? Do you not need to be an Estonian citizen or bear an Estonian passport? No, you don't need to have them, because if you want to become a supporting member, you can do it without having the Estonian citizenship. However, if you want to become an active member, you need to be an Estonian citizen. Thank you. There are two very specific questions about security in Estonia. First of them is that soon the 9th of May will come around. Those of you who are unaware of what is that particular date about, then this is the date when Russia celebrates victory in the Second World War. So soon we will have the 9th of May coming up. Does it add to the anxiety in Estonia? And the other question is it safe to travel to Estonia this summer, or rather should the plans be postponed? The plans should not be postponed under no circumstances, especially in summer. Already today we have a nice spring weather here, and it becomes even nicer every day. As for the 9th of May, we had the 9th of May 1 year before, 2 years before. We have the 9th of May every year here, you know that. Every year it comes, it goes. The 10th of May comes. It is always safe and secure here, and you need not be afraid of the 9th of May this year either. Secondly, the rest of Europe celebrates the Europe Day on the 9th of May. On the 9th of May, the current European Union was laid the foundation too, so the European Union is a peace project, and we are celebrating peace on the 9th of May. And of course, we are doing that in style. In front of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs building at 8 p.m. on the 9th of May, there will be a big open-air concert. Everybody's welcome. It is open for everybody. It will be a wonderful event. Those of you who cannot attend, please watch on at the public broadcasting TV channel in the evening. The broadcast will be shown there as well. Thank you. I know that Markus is also coming to Estonia in the end of May as well, if I'm not mistaken, so it seems that you dare to really travel here. For sure. I would like to comment briefly on the 9th of May. Here we also have had the 9th of May as well. In recent years, there have been some parades held with red flags around, and even the Estonian Soviet flag has been waved around. We have seen small children, certain uniforms being marched around, and several hundreds of people have participated, and probably they will do something similar this year on the 9th of May as well. As for the Estonian community and the other communities, then we are in a position celebrating the 9th of May as a Europe Day. And on Saturday, we will post photos of the Ukrainian war in front of the Toronto city government. There will be European diplomats and the mayor of Toronto. Some will also join from Ottawa. And we will open up a photo exhibition of the Ukrainian war images. And we show unity with Ukraine, with each other. And this is how we will celebrate the 9th of May in Toronto this year. Thank you. Let me now touch upon internal security. Probably people do have the question of whether there is a fifth column in Estonia. So to talk about it, these are the people who are silently working against the state. They are the so-called divergents. Should we be afraid of an internal provocation taking place in Estonia? Estonia is a free society, and in a free society you find all kinds of people. There are those that believe that the earth is flat. Of course, we have them as well. However, it is safe in Estonia. And as a confirmation, I can refer to the fact that the security situation for us is not a new one. We have always considered the option, and our defense authorities and security authorities have been on top of their tasks. Not only since the beginning of the aggression, we have worked on it for years. We have managed it for years. We have become stronger, and we will continue becoming stronger. Let me say once again, the events taking place in Ukraine or in European security, this is not a problem of Eastern Europe or the Scandinavian or Baltic countries. Ukraine is equally far from German borders as it is from Estonian borders. We could also ask whether people dare to travel to Germany or France. Is it safe on the streets there? All kinds of things can happen on the big streets there. In any case, it is more secure to be here in Estonia, especially for those who know it, who know how to behave, who do not fall asleep on the streets. Of course, it is safe in Estonia, as safe as it was a year ago or 2 years ago. Ilvar, would you like to add anything? Let me give you an example. There is no point in speculating about divergence or the fifth column or the saboteurs. The list is a long one, and we could open up start writing an exciting novel or an espionage novel here and find parallels from these worlds. But I really agree with what Jonatan was saying. The security authorities are doing their job. They are keeping an eye out. They are monitoring. In recent years, the Night Watch grouping has done their nightly parade in these times. And recently we heard that one of the members of this society was sent out from Estonia towards the east. So this is another sign of our security authorities keeping an eye out for those that try to agitate others or carry out provocations. But generally speaking, currently we have heard no remarks on the situation being anything different from what has been there before. And I must unfortunately say that it is hard to surprise with anything right now, as we are seeing war waging in Europe. So we are aware of things, we are keeping an eye out. And as for the defense matters, we will have the major exercise called SEAL or the Hedgehog. We will do what we have planned for. We will practice with the reservists. We will work together with the allies. And this is one part of the plan that we are using for strengthening the defense of Estonia.
So what kind of possibility do we have that Estonia would have a great, bigger NATO base, which is a permanent base? So this is one of our political aims as well. And of course, the defense forces, we have two tasks. Also make sure the plans are realistic and then find the troops who would also implement these plans. But I would also like to say that in Estonia we have more allied forces than we had 2 months ago, because NATO has reacted to what has happened, and it has been a preventative and strong reaction, and of course we'll see more reactions. Madrid summit this June will bring new decisions regarding the strengthening of the collective defense, and I believe that the entire Northern Europe security will receive a lot of positive news over the next few weeks. So it's quite likely that we'll get more friends in NATO. To clarify that in Estonia, as far as I know, we have about 2,000 NATO troops. And I cannot really give you an exact figure, but we have had some exercises. I'm sure this figure is actually going up. And we have also the NATO air policing. And one NATO officer is right next to me, so this is also NATO. So all Estonian defense forces are part of NATO. There is a comment as well that in many Estonian communities across the world, Estonians have been very active in support of Ukraine. Estonians have been leaders across the world. But let's sum this up. To conclude, I hope it's not going to be too negative of a question, but what do you think what the possibilities are so that the country east of us, the reason why we're discussing these topics, if we talk about Russia, that a change is actually possible there, because we can be pessimistic in the Western media. Then there's some analysis which being published, which say that soon we'll be back to business as usual, because Gerhard Schröder, former German chancellor, said that yes, soon will be business as usual, because we hope that it's not going to go like this. But is there hope that so first of all, the big Western countries are not going to go back to business as usual? And is there any hope that as we're sitting here in 10 or 15 years from now, that the situation has improved? So what is happening in Russia is a decision to be made by the Russian people. We can discuss it, but it is not really up to us. What is up to us is that Russia would remain within the borders of Russia and would not try to force their world order on us when we don't want to hear about it. So European security, Western security is what we need to work on first. And I believe that the future will be bright. It doesn't mean that we have to rest on the laurels. We have to make efforts on a daily basis. So there is no end of history. There was no end of history in 1991. There was no end of history in 2004 when we joined NATO. It is our task to make constantly our efforts. But Gerhard Schröder is wrong. There is no regression. There is no turning back to where we can ignore reality, and it's possible to sell European values and while maintaining power. That's not going to happen. Thank you very much. Markus, what do you think? I believe we have to be prepared that Vladimir Putin will remain in power until 2035. And we need to support Russian independent media. Estonia does it very well. Same for Latvia and Lithuania. We receive the journalists, we support them. And we support the opposition activists, human rights activists. My good friend, Vladimir Kurameza, is in jail, and he might be there for many years. So we want to support his colleagues, work in order to get him out of jail. And it's not only Estonia which has a great role here, but every member of NATO has this role to support free Russia. This is what we can do. But we need to be prepared that Putin will be in power for many years. Thank you very much. Ilmar? It's actually very hard to forecast and to be able to come up with a certain scenario, because what we have seen over the last few months is not news, although it is not pleasant. So things which have not changed after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and if there's been an improvement, then this is a country which follows its own path. I agree with Jonatan that we should not really overthink it. We should not really think so much what is happening in Estonia or in Russia, but we should think about what is happening here and keep the Western countries and our partners and allies united, and not to give in to these different suggestions which have been made. So would it be energy dependence or something else? It's painful. And as Jonatan said, is this the price of cheap Russian gas? Or we are selling our own security, freedom, and the borders of our countries. And I have a comment from the previous forum which says it's important not to lose the understanding that our existence is fragile. We have to maintain our values through music, through literature, dances, and singing. So in addition to hard power, we have these values which have helped us to survive through the centuries. Thank you very much to Jonatan Vseviov, Ilmar Tamm, Margus Kolga, who joined us from Toronto. And next, we have some music we can enjoy. We have a singer-songwriter, Mari Kalkun, who will have a very emotional musical presentation.
See lugu kannab pealkirja Somewhere There's War, kusagil on sõda. Ja see sündis
So this is a song which was born after the beginning of the war in Ukraine on February 25th. That was the same night. And I think that was the time many of us could not sleep. The song is Somewhere There Is War. And so we had suddenly this very clear understanding of what was happening. And maybe the impetus to this song was that usually we are used to seeing these events in the news somewhere. But this is not the understanding we should have at this moment, because it is here, it is now, and we should not get used to it. So this is the song of hope and love.
Somewhere there's war, but far from me. Somebody's torn on a battlefield. A baby cries, but it's not mine. Somebody dies, but it's not me. Can I still feel? Can I still feel human? Humanity, humanity. Somewhere there's war. It's at my home. My brother's torn on a battlefield. A baby cries. It's my child. somebody dies, oh look, it's me. Can I still feel, can I still feel human? Can I still feel, can I still feel human? To be a man, does it mean to fight, to close my heart, to have no fright? A human, a human, a human. When I was a child, I looked up the sky. I used to feel my mind is free. My mind is free, my mind is free, free. Your mind is free, your mind is free, free. Free.
Suur tänu, Mari Kalkun.
Thank you very much, Mari Kalkun, for this beautiful music, Somewhere There Is War. And now we shall continue the discussion. So the topic is, what is the benefit of Estonian e-government for Estonians abroad? And I have invited here Luukas Kristjan Ilves, Hellika Kirt, and Erlich. So this topic, perhaps for some people who know a lot about the state, e-governance, and the systems, then there's a question, why are we discussing it? But there are many people who are maybe born somewhere else or have been away for a long time and are actually not using and maybe are not even aware of the possibilities which are offered by the e-government. So perhaps we should discuss a little bit about the e-Estonia, and also let's talk about practical possibilities, what can be done, what can't be done for people who live elsewhere, and a little bit about the background information as well. So Luukas Kristjan Ilves is the Deputy Secretary General for the Digital Development of the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Communications, who coordinates the development, implementation and supervision of development plans in the field of telecommunications and postal communications. So this is the state information systems and information society services. So a lot of tasks, IT man. But before taking up his position as Deputy Secretary General, Luukas was head of strategy of Guard Time, which is a startup company, and then held various positions in the Estonian government and at the European Commission. Luukas has graduated from Stanford University. Then Hellika Kirt is a consul at the Estonian Embassy in London. Hellika has worked in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs since 1996, including holding the position of the Director in the International Contracts Office and the Director of Consular Services. She has worked as a consul also in Paris and Stockholm. Erlich is the business architect of the electronic identity of the Estonian Information Systems Board. So he has had almost 18 years of experience in the field of identity and digital signature, and he has obtained an engineering degree from Dalarna University in Sweden. He lived in Sweden for a long time and moved back to Estonia 18 years ago. So there's a lot of experience. But Luukas, let's start with you. So briefly, as a way of introduction, what is the e-Estonia like? Because we have heard a lot of it, but maybe not everybody knows so much about it. Let's not talk about e-Estonia, but the Estonian Digital Society, which became famous about 30 years ago. Estonia is one of the first countries in the world which took internet to schools, and not only to the capital, but across the country. And so today we can see the outcome. It's now almost two digital generations, and Estonia today is famous for being a country of unicorns, because in Estonia we have had over 10 startup companies who have exceeded a value of $1 billion. So Skype is one of them, and also Bolt, which is a rideshare company, and many others. And because of this e-Estonia we're talking about, Estonia is probably the best place in the world where to start a company, especially a fast-growing technology company. But now, if we're talking about the public sector side of things more specifically, then e-Estonia started about 20 plus years ago, when Estonia was one of the first countries in the world who issued a digital identity. So that was possibility to authenticate yourself online the same way as you can do it in the physical world with the document. And you can sign documents which have an equal status to your handwritten signature on paper. So this digital identity is a basis for a very rich service environment. So regardless whatever you do in the public sector and private sector, in addition to these couple of services we talk about in a moment, you can do everything on internet. You can pay taxes. You can do that in many countries, but it takes you about 30 seconds. So we have user satisfaction over 90% because of the very easy digitalization. But it's quite unique that you can choose in the internet over 105 countries. We have been one who have been voting over internet, and this environment is so popular that in addition to 1.13 million Estonians, a little bit more, are talking about people in Estonia now, but we have about 100,000 people across the world who have become e-residents. So that means that they have applied one version of the digital identity, which enables them to do business in this environment here. And this e-Estonia is constantly developing. So we are not talking about the physical things or paper process and digitalized version, but we want to develop them through using technologies. So we do really amazing things, and we have a project called Bürokrat. So Krat is this mystical creature in Estonian mythology who does things for you, and Bürokrat is the public sector version of this mythical creature. But using AI in the public sector means that we are creating an Estonian chat robot for Estonian services, and perhaps using voice on the phone soon. So letting you know when you have a new driving license which is being already posted to you, or will contact you if you have a right for a certain benefit. So there are many things. Recently we had the world's first 3D model of all the buildings which went live. So the planning permissions have gone there, which is very beneficial for the green transition. So there are lots of things. But if we talk about specific services, then we think more about this when it comes to the same way as it comes to the best private sector companies. We want to improve things all the time. It's not about popularity, but a well-designed service, it brings success home to you. So if we talk about healthcare, if we talk about the rights of people, a good design is important so that the value behind it will be achievable. I'm not sure how much time do I have. We're going to talk about cybersecurity as well. So very quickly.
It has all been possible thanks to the security in the digital world. Security has been a very important consideration from scratch. The most important value for the e-Estonia is that there need to be security measures and there need to be authentication of people in a safe way. We are constantly thinking about how to safeguard the security of a state, how to keep the state secure, the data of people secure, so that people would feel they have the control over their data. Currently, you can see how the public sector has made use of your data. We are also opening up the openware codes for people so that data could be monitored for the private sector as well. And hereby, transparency is the best safeguard for protecting personal data and for the orderly use of this data. As for security, I would also say that the situation in Ukraine has made us consider the security aspects in the cyber world as well. The most visible part of the war is conventional war, missiles, attacks against schools. Cyber war has also played a major role in the conflict. The Ukrainians prepared very well for several cyber attacks, and it has borne fruit. Over the last 2 months, the essential services of Ukraine have managed to uphold surprisingly well. Banks, electricity, logistics are operating in Ukraine. Cyber attacks have not demolished that, thanks to what the Ukrainians have done. And Estonia, with other allies, has been a major support for the Ukrainians hereby as well. Now, thinking about what happened here 10 years ago, bearing that scenario in mind, we should update, we should back up important national information, public sector information, to make sure that our services can be used across the world at all times. We need to make sure that the state of Estonia, including the digital e-state, would keep operating irrespective of what is going on in the ground. We have already said that it is safe in Estonia, but we have also prepared for the worst in the digital domain as well. Thank you. I would like to remind our viewers that you can submit your comments and questions through the workshop.com environment. We are eagerly awaiting them. Mark, let us move on with you. You were living in Sweden when the e-services had not been developed yet. It is difficult to ask about your opinion at the time about the services, but what do you think? What is the benefit of the e-Estonia for Estonians living across the world? Yes. E-Estonia was still taking its baby steps when I was returning to Estonia. When I returned to Estonia, e-Estonia had just launched its first services aimed at citizens in the digital world. Actually, when we look at the facts that you have no tangible or tangible connections with Estonia, you only have the mental connection, then you might not have the material need for e-Estonia. However, when we look at what have been the most disturbing moments in participating in Estonian society when you yourself are abroad, for myself, it was the elections. Participating in elections, I was always interested in local elections. The local elections where I had my relatives standing as candidates or living there. Every time there was an election, I had to travel several hundreds of kilometers, take a couple of days off, or send my ballot in by post. It took a lot of time and hassle. When the e-elections opportunity was brought to us, it was a major breakthrough. And I can see that each Estonian citizen who bears the Estonian passport has the e-voting opportunity as well, without having to change their daily routine or their daily lives. Another eureka moment for me was Back in 2002, the first Estonian digital identity, or the ID card, was launched. I felt that I didn't need that. I didn't have any real estate in Estonia, so I didn't really know what to do with that card. But the eureka moment came when I understood that it is possible to conclude contracts not only with the state, but also with private people or with companies in a digital way by using an ID card that gives you the opportunity of providing a digital signature. And by now, the digital signature is equalized with the handwritten signature, not only in Estonia, but also abroad in the European Union. So you can authenticate your digital identity, you can sign documents by using the electronic signature in whatever domain you need to sign the contract, and it is valid, equally valid, with the handwritten signature in all EU member states. So for me, this was a breakthrough. And of course, I started coming upon all the wonders that came along with the e-state as such after that. Thank you. Hellika, you work as a consul at the Estonian Embassy in London. What are the practical questions that you need to deal with every day? I understand one of the issues is related to the Estonian ID card. Of course, the UK situation differs from the rest because the country is no longer a member of the EU. So the situation has changed. But what are the practical issues you're dealing with? Thank you, and hello to everyone. Yes, London is a somewhat special example due to Brexit. But the citizen is still interested in both the ID card and passport. People living abroad use passports and ID cards either as a travel document or personal identification document. When people apply for an ID card, they say they apply for it because it is convenient to carry along in your wallet or in your pocket, unlike the passport, which is bigger. And the ID card is applied for when it turns out that it is necessary for something as well. For example, like Mark was saying, for signing a contract with someone. For example, you want to sign a contract with your tenant and you don't even need to meet up in person. You could then conclude the agreement, but when the person does not have an ID card, they go and apply for it, they get the PIN codes, and then they can provide the digital signature on the lease contract. Often, the ID card is also required for income declaration. Once a year, people do remember that they need to submit this declaration, and of course, it is most convenient to submit it by using the ID card. Now, as for some concerns, then even if a person holds an ID card, and if they want to take it as a travel document, or they only use it as a travel document, they don't have the PIN codes at all because they never got them or applied for them. So they can turn to the foreign representation of the embassy abroad and apply for the PIN codes. The other thing that you need to have is a very practical thing, the ID card reader. When you're abroad, you don't know what it might even look like or where can you get it. Of course, you can get it online these days. And the last, so to say, icing on the cake is the fingerprints. You need to have valid fingerprints. Even if the person has ticked all the boxes for applying for a particular document, it might turn out that the fingerprints are no longer valid. So they need to give the fingerprint marks on site in the offices of Police and Border Guard Board in Estonia or in embassies in other countries. So you cannot do it anywhere else. You need to come there on site, give the mark of your fingerprints, you need to have the card physically in your hands, you need to have the ID card reader, and then you can start working with these. Let me specify. The viewers might also think about whether there is an alternative as such for the ID card. The ID card is essential for using these services. There is no alternative to the card, is there? When we're talking about digital services. Yes, as for the alternatives Probably Mark can talk about them. You are probably referring to mobile ID and smart ID. Let me finish my thought first. In a foreign country, you might not even need the ID card in the first place. When there is no connection with Estonia, so-called tangible connection with Estonia, like Mark was saying, there is no bank account, no GP, no income comes to you from Estonia, you are not paying credit to Estonia, you are not leasing anything from Estonia, you are not interested in participating in elections, then you might not even need it. Mark, let me ask you about the digital ID in practice. Where can it be used? As I understand, there are problems in some countries. Yes, it differs across countries in the EU as well, although the same legislation applies to all. Nevertheless, not all member states guarantee access to the means for giving a digital signature to their citizens. However, there are very many new service providers on the market now, thanks to this, that provide this convenience service for a little fee, for a small fee, and you can give digital signatures across the world. Of course, it is a different topic whether each digital signature is equal to the handwritten signature in all circumstances. There are some standards and requirements that need to be followed. But the state of Estonia has guaranteed that the highest standards are complied with. All the digital alternatives also support the digital signature. As for the alternatives, we know that all the alternatives have the login window opening up. For example, if you have the mobile ID instead of the ID card, then you need to have a contract with a mobile communication company in Estonia. For example, some foreigners that frequently visit Estonia might consider taking up the mobile ID. The private sector has provided an opportunity called Smart ID. Smart ID as such is not a national electronic document, but it is based on a national document. You need to have either an ID card or a mobile ID to get Smart ID for yourself. If you want to apply for a Smart ID electronically, you don't need to come here in person. Of course, you can come here in person as well. If you hold a bank account in Estonia, you go to a bank office and the bank will authenticate your person there. And the third opportunity is that if you hold a bank account in Estonia, then when you can have access to the bank, you can combine your Estonian biometric passport and the bank account information. And by using these two, you can generate Smart ID for yourself. Smart ID is an application for smart devices generated with the use of technical means so that it complies with the security requirements set to both the ID card and mobile ID, and the minimum requirements are all met. Let me specify. Probably you are the most competent person to answer to it. What are the services that can be used and cannot be used with these means? As for the services, everybody that has a personal identification code and electronic ID, they can log on to basically any service. Now, the question is, what can they use or what can they see? First, let us take the citizen portal eesti.ee. You can always see all the data about you that the state of Estonia holds. When you're an Estonian citizen that has been born abroad and you have no registered data about yourself, then you won't see any data about yourself there. For example, I don't have any education data about myself uploaded in eesti.ee because I did not pursue my education here. The same applies to those that have lived abroad for a long time, that moved away from Estonia before the digital era. Their data might not be displayed on this portal either. However, if you hold real estate, then real estate often is something that ties the diaspora Estonians with Estonia. For example, if you have inherited a plot of land from your ancestors, or you share a plot of land or some other real estate with your relatives, you can see data related to all these real estate transactions. The same applies to tax matters. If you have some income from Estonia, or you're doing business in Estonia, or if you're renting out a property, then you can see all these tax data on the portal eesti.ee. As for my personal experience, I think the most important and most useful thing for an Estonian is that there is the commercial register in Estonia. So there are e-business services in Estonia available for you. If you have the ID card, you can start up a company in Estonia by using the business register. Founding a company takes about 5 to 20 minutes, a maximum of 2 hours if it's your first time on this site. This is unique in the world. You log on to a portal and 5 minutes later you will have founded a company. And this gives you the opportunity not only to found a company in Estonia and do business here, but it also gives you an opportunity to enter the European market. It might be especially attractive for Estonians living outside the EU, in no matter which corner of the world, providing some, for example, soft services, so that you don't need to transport any products or across the borders. For example, you provide consultation services, you offer the design for web pages, whatnot, all kinds of soft services. You can found a company in Estonia and provide a service to other companies on the EU market as if you were a European company. And this will reduce the bureaucracy for you in terms of tax and all these documents. Thank you. Luukas, there is a very specific question from the viewers as well. You mentioned cybersecurity. The question is, how safe is the e-state, e-Estonia? Are my data 100% safe and secure? As for cybersecurity, the same applies as that applies in security. There is never 100% guarantee in terms of security. When we look at how data are being secured in many parts of the world, then we have managed to mitigate many of the relevant risks. Like I was saying, we need to be transparent about what has happened. And should there be any incidents taking place in Estonia, Estonia so far has been very transparent. I think that and I'm sure that the data are as safe as they can be in this world. A very specific question, Hellika, about the ID card reader. The question is, where can we get the ID card reader from? Can we get it from a consul abroad? That's a good one. As we know, a consul is not allowed to sell anything, so you cannot buy it from us. But yes, these days we can say that in our offices we have a number of ID card readers that we hand out to the citizens as the elections are coming up soon. And when a citizen has got an ID card and the PIN codes, then they could make use of them. But we suggest you take a look at the online opportunities, online shopping opportunities. We know that all kinds of ID card readers are sold there, so I suggest you read the instructions thoroughly for the product so you know that this is the right one. And the easiest thing is that welcome home. When you come and visit Estonia, then it's easy to buy it and take it home with you from here. So this was the commercial break for ID card readers. Now, Luukas, you wanted to say something. Yes, a bit of my personal experience about using the digital services abroad. I grew up abroad. I used to work in Belgium before I returned here. One of my parents has lived abroad for a long time and now spends more time in Estonia now that he has grandchildren here, and the other parent was living abroad in the meantime. Our common experience has been that thanks to the e-Estonia being there, we have been able to do our business. We have been able to be present in terms of taxes, in terms of real estate, companies, data services, we have been able to manage it all in a very simple way when we are not mainly based in Estonia. Starting from communicating with the bank, paying your phone bills and participating in elections. It is all made very easy thanks to this e-ID. You do not need to be no longer worried about remembering the passwords. For example, you don't need to even go to a notary's office to make a transaction as you need to do abroad. So this is an encouragement for those that are currently not present here in Estonia and still doubting whether they dare to buy real estate here or found a company here. Do it. It is very simple. Compared to any other country in the world, it is easy to do it here, especially. Unfortunately, we have seen during the COVID times that you might not be able to be here for years in person, but these services still remain available for you. We are talking about access, but we are also talking about other matters. Estonia stands out not only in terms of the ease of business, but also the practical side of business. No matter whether you're talking about real estate or elections, it is very easy. If you need to renew your driving license, you can do it online. If you would like to apply for a European driving license, you can do it online. If you need to apply for an Estonian driving license, you can also start applying for it online. If you want to have an Estonian health insurance, of course, you need to have it first here, but you can also have it as a European citizen. So when we are talking about the ease of business for citizens, then of course, there are a lot of values and a lot of benefits for it.
So I'd like to discuss a little bit this inconvenience which is linked to physical ID card. So this is changing in nearest future because we are making efforts to achieve the same, that the identity and everything which is linked to it would be mobile. Because right now, the way it works is that you receive your ID card, you can link it with mobile ID, smart ID, but there's a physical ID card as well. So I do hope in near future it's not going to be like this, that we can put this identity into the mobile phone. We can maybe see the increase of role of biometric data. Maybe we can hand the new PIN codes over without you having to show up in person to the consuls or to the police and border guard board. I look at Mark because Mark is the person with whom I would need to make these changes. So there's a lot of work we need to do. But this user experience, especially for people who, for whom it is not easy today to access our embassies or the police and border guard office, right now it's not the best in the world, but we are improving it. We are going to make it best in the world. So we're working for that aim. So my last encouragement will be that should we be part of this ecosystem? Should we depend on this ecosystem? I would say yes, because this is getting more and more convenient. I have one question here, maybe also for the others. What shall we tell to people who are not Estonian citizens? How can they participate and use the services of e-Estonia? One thing we mentioned is e-residency, because if you're not a citizen, then you should apply for e-residency. I think it's €100, and it takes some background checks, which are not complicated. And then afterwards, you get a card, which is an analog to an ID card, but it's not valid as a physical document, so it has no photo. But it gives an ID code, and you can access to the same services. So it has been done by about 100,000 people, including many people in the European Union, for whom, as Europeans, they would have a right to establish a company here anyway. But it's a convenience that the ID card and the services which are linked to it are so good and much better than service environments in their own countries, that they will come here anyway. And one thing we should mention is that we should talk about not about citizens and not people who are not citizens, but who are permanent residents. So we talk about permanent residents, so people who have a residence permit in Estonia and who are under temporary protection, for example. If you think about the refugees from Ukraine and other countries, they have a right for e-identity as well and have access to all these services. So if you have family members who have a right of residence who are not citizens here, then they can do it as well. So, but you should not come alone. Take your family with you, because the residence permit card is also a digital card, the same as an ID card for a citizen or a e-residence card. Mark, one thing I would like to discuss the election as well for the parliament. Riigikogu. Maybe people do not know that you can participate in the parliamentary elections also when you live outside Estonia. Yes, indeed, if you are a citizen, then you have this right as a citizen. And in this case, you do not have to apply for ballot to be sent by post. But Estonian elections are unique, that a week before the elections, voting will start. So this preliminary voting period, that you can vote by post and going to our offices abroad as well, to the embassies. At the same time, we also have electronic voting, and it's done over internet. It should not be confused with the elections we can see in many other countries, where it is some sort of a booth with buttons, and you press a button and there's an electronic vote. No, because it is actually the same principle as it is with paper ballot. You have a paper ballot and you put it in a box. But this ballot is an electronic file. You can follow the path of this file. When did you post it? When did you sign it? You sign it with a digital signature. So it is unforgeable. And then you can see that this arrived in the vote counting system. And on the day of the elections, then all the votes are counted, including electronic votes. What is interesting is that electronic voting allows you to vote as many times as you want within this time frame, which is the pre-election period. So that means today you might choose one candidate, and tomorrow you might change your mind and choose somebody else. Your latest choice always stands. And on the day of the elections, you can go physically to the voting point in Estonia or elsewhere. And then you can offer this on paper. So it could be some people who are somewhat suspicious and then decide that, no, I do not have confidence in it, I want to have it on paper. And then the latest choice cancels all the previous choices. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, time flies, so we have to sum up. So we have a comment from the viewers, whether the e-Estonia is actually e-Estonia so unique. Has anybody been following us on our coattails? So Luukas, maybe you are the most competent person to answer. I think this is not so unique as it was 10 years ago, because many and other positive role models, other countries are following our lead. And we have some specific applications where we are not the best in the world. Where the government or the public sector is not the best is the design. And this update of design and interface, we have applications who look like from year 2013, because they actually are from 2013. And what makes us unique is the user uptake or user penetration. So our applications are just not only good, but they're actually being used universally by all the society. And these services we are discussing here, then the digital version is the main reason. And if somebody else follows us, then we need some friendly competition, because that's a good additional motivation to do the next cool thing. So there's another example, because if you talk about e-voting, for example, you have to download this software to your desktop, to Windows or Mac, or I think Linux works as well. So you can confirm your vote with EID, but you can't vote on your mobile phone. But right now we are working on an application which allows you to vote on your mobile phone, and we're going to pilot it during the next parliamentary elections, but it will be definitely in use over the next few years. And it's a new development where we've been lagging behind because the users have already moved into mobile phones, so we'll catch up. Mark, briefly, it's an interesting question, and I wanted to actually look at another angle of it. So is it a sport that you need to be better than somebody else? If I look at the e-Estonia, then it's a form of open democracy, and we're not comparing whether if somebody catches up with somebody else in democracy and now we have to catch up. Rather, we're happy that if other countries follow our lead and develop as far or even further, so that we can also catch up on their coattails, so we don't have to be always the pioneers. So we are all human beings, and humans can err. So we have also sometimes made wrong decisions, and if we look at what other countries are doing, and we are making decisions based on their decisions, what's the most practical approach? And so this is the comment I had. Thank you very much. I'm sure we could talk for quite a while here, but now we have to move on. So thank you very much, Luukas Kristjan Ilves, Erlich, Hellika Kirt, for this discussion. And now, dear viewers, I have a great pleasure to introduce the interview with the President Kersti Kaljulaid, and we're going to discuss the international Estonians and the future and the present. We have a great pleasure to welcome here President Kersti Kaljulaid. Welcome. We are being viewed by Estonians across the world in different countries. So this is a virtual forum. So you have lived outside Estonia for quite a while. So what do you think? What should be what we should know about Estonia elsewhere, because every Estonian is ambassador of Estonia. Well, it is definitely so, but what is most important is that Estonians elsewhere in the world, they would have to do their things well, so that everybody says that I had an Estonian here and who was doing their things really well. Oh, I know that my child has an Estonian in the class, and they do great potato salad for class events. So I think it's what is most important, that you are good at what you do. But we know that usually when you say you are Estonian, then people tell you to get your Skype running or fix the computer. But what is being known less is that Estonia has a beautiful nature, because often we do not value our beauty so much, and Estonia is also fairly empty. So you can come to Estonia and think your own thoughts in peace and quiet. Maybe this is something we should really link to our Estonian story a bit more. Over the last 20 years, Estonians have gone elsewhere to study, and many people come back to Estonia. But we also have many people who remain elsewhere. They have their own personal private lives elsewhere already. So what should we do better, or should we do something better in order to encourage them to participate in Estonian life, or to come back, or to maintain the connection better, so that Estonia would win from it? Is this an objective? I don't think it has to be an objective on its own, because everybody has a right to fulfill their dreams wherever they want to do that. In Europe, we have the entire generation of Erasmus students who identify through Erasmus program that I want to study elsewhere and met other people like me. So Europe is my home. But at the same time, Estonia may be one of the most adjusted countries when it comes to this free movement, because we have a possibility to participate in our own democratic processes. We don't have to go and post an envelope in an embassy somewhere. You can inform us where you are, where your children attend school without you having to show up anywhere. And I would like to encourage people who have left Estonia and who have been e-residents already. So the young people who are leaving now, they can't even remember filling out paperwork. You should remain connecting to Estonia. What else we can do is that we are dreaming of international school. So this is where you can get your vocabulary, or how you can pick up math terms, for example. The fractions and so forth. But we would like to prepare this school program, so you can go wherever you are in the world, you can attend the school in Estonia. If you manage to do that, then we have completely adjusted to the global world, because people in Estonia might want to go to Portugal, for example, with their children for a couple of months. That should be possible. In other countries, it is not possible. So that should be one thing, that we have this great freedom, including geographical freedom.
That's an interesting thought. Let me ask whether it would be the digital format created by the Estonian state, so it would be like a digital school. Yes, indeed, we actually have schools, such as on the island of Vormsi in Estonia, that take on pupils from abroad, for example, that come from elsewhere, and they can study in the school of Vormsi. So we have respective study materials as well, and we can also provide higher, upper-level secondary education to people. And it could be as a complementary school or maybe even a main school. And this makes Estonia especially valuable. When we think about the big countries in Central Europe, you cannot really miss school for even a week without getting into trouble. We as a country are flexible, and if we are able to build the country so that Estonians can be wherever they want to be without ceasing to be Estonians, no matter whether they are in Germany or France. We have got very far already, but I think that the nuance related to schools is the biggest bottleneck these days. Yes, and it would also give an opportunity for people to study Estonian. Indeed, they could study Estonian language even if they are studying the main program in German, French, or English. They could look at the respective Estonian terms so that the way back to Estonia and to the Estonian universities would always remain open for you. Of course, it relates to the offspring of Estonians that have been born elsewhere. For example, when I have talked to some of them that have been born in the US, Canada, the UK, or Australia, I have talked to a couple of them. And sometimes these offspring of Estonians feel that maybe the state of Estonia has not made full use of the potential or sufficient use of the potential. There is no separate effort that has been made to attract them. No, it has not been made, and it is not being made. Estonia is very self-confident. It is self-confident enough. It knows that we have 1.3 million people on 45,000 square kilometers. We belong to the wealthy club of NATO. It is a great country, and here we also remind to each other that you could think about what can you do for the state, not only ask about what can the state do for you. This is a great principle for the country, but that everybody is welcome. But I think that no class in Estonia should think that the initiative must come from the state. You are always welcome here. Please do come here. And it is certainly easy to find well-paid jobs here. We have low-level of unemployment here. There are very many IT sector jobs that are have a competitive salary option. Your employer will fly you to Silicon Valley, to other wonderful places. This is all offered by Estonia. It doesn't need any additional effort. We are not making any additional efforts. Here we have a clear message. Do come here. We are waiting. Now, one of the topics of this forum is e-state, e-Estonia. You briefly mentioned that already. It turns out that very many Estonians that live abroad might not be abreast of things, certain things. For example, they don't need to have a practical connection with Estonia as they are not living here or working here. You have been a very active advocate for the digital state of Estonia. You keep doing that across the world. Is the e-state of Estonia one of the best of its kind? And what positive things could we expect from the future? It is certainly one of the best of its kind because there is no one that is like us. We have done it in private-public sector partnership together. It is a unified system where all the public and private services are run on one secure platform on the X road. There is no other similar system. Very many countries have very good services, but they don't have this uniform platform. And it means that a paper-based service is often automated, that you can submit your data on addresses, number of children, 90 times a year, maybe even. And we here have cross-use of data. I have not come across it anywhere else. On the one hand, we have digitalized everything, but there is a certain so-called bank teller between an ordinary citizen and the state. This is an assistant for you that will help you to navigate in this world. And if we could give the self-service option for everybody, it would be very similar to our system. But I would once again emphasize that we don't have such an X-road model or the public service model anywhere else in the world. As for the daily use of e-services, then I thought that I have used this e-services of the state once this year. I filled in my income declaration. We are using the same infrastructure for private services as well. And it seems that we are constantly active in the e-state, e-Estonia. And this is what makes e-Estonia special. And this is also an opportunity to tell the offspring of Estonians that are not citizens. Maybe e-residency would be an option for them. This is also one of the topics at our forum. Yes, a citizen can always participate in elections. I know about offspring and about those that live in third countries outside the EU. Very many of them make use of their citizenship by birth in terms of participating at elections, and I have nothing against it. It's wonderful to see it bear fruit. Of course, e-residence is one of the opportunities. It is necessary for everybody, no matter whether they live here in Estonia or elsewhere. If you want to do business here, you can apply for an e-residence. For example, you come to live in Estonia from Sweden, but you cannot automatically manage a company here if you don't have access to the e-services by using the e-residency. Of course, do make use of e-residency. One of the topics of the forum, maybe the most important one these days, is security. Very many people, Estonians living abroad, and our friends are worried about security in the region. Maybe they are even more worried than we are worried here locally. We know the reason. This is the Russian attack against Ukraine, Russian invasion. What would you tell these people as an encouragement who are worried about how Estonia is doing? Actually, we must say that we can, to a certain extent, understand this concern, and it is irrational as well. It is quite funny to sit in Berlin and hear some discussions on whether it is safe in Tallinn, because the distance between Kiev and Berlin and Kiev and Tallinn is exactly the same. Indeed, we can look at how the foreign capital has behaved and other matters, and it seems as if our security is less safeguarded in some people's eyes. But I must say that NATO has never failed to protect the territorial integrity of its member state. Now, as for what could be a reference to any changes, then let us remind that when the Ukrainian attack against Ukraine had just started. It was supposed to be over in 48 hours, and there were some articles published saying that this is a fait accompli, this is done, this is post factum. And there was some sentence that made us thought if we hadn't brought Ukraine back into the arms of Russia, we would have had to face the NATO Union. And it seems that some people still had a border they were unwilling to cross on the 26th of February when this article was published. We know that it is safe to be in NATO, and we have seen the sharp change in the public opinion in Sweden and Finland. They have become much more supportive of joining the NATO. And of course, we must deduce that it is safe to be in NATO if people are considering joining it. Would you recommend Estonian youngsters to join the Estonian Defence Forces when they live abroad? It largely depends on circumstances. If you have no connections with the Estonian society and you have no plans for pursuing your education career here or for coming to live here, you don't speak Estonian language either, then you might find maybe some other options for participating in Estonian life. In any case, everybody is welcome who wants to connect their future with Estonia. Maybe they could start with the Estonian Defence Forces. They can overcome the linguistic problems because you end up in the right linguistic environment there, and you will immediately get this certain safety net around you, because it is always tricky to find your close circle of friends when you change countries. So maybe you could start from the Defence Forces indeed. Now, as we know, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres appointed you the ambassador for the rights of women, children, and youngsters for 2 years. What kinds of opportunities has this position offered to you in the current international environment, and what have you managed to do? This remains an obligation to remember that here in Europe and in the world, we see dozens of conflicts every day. During the pandemic times, very many people fell to absolute poverty. Children are being vaccinated less against all kinds of diseases, so we are not standing in a good spot. All these nice declarations, all these nice goals have actually not been achieved. And in a sense, I could say that I have completely failed in my job. I knew that when I was proposed this position, then I knew what was happening in the world. Unfortunately, when there are crises during time in the world, the rights of children and women are overlooked the first. In my role and in our role, we have tried to launch different initiatives, and I hope before the 2 years come to an end, we can see that the births can be registered remotely as well, as we have got used to doing in Estonia. We need to help mothers and children no matter where they are. We have talked to different African countries about how such a thing could be set up. Maybe it could be piloted, and it would be something practical that could be achieved. Indeed, these 2 years in this position is the time when the society has to understand that these matters are important. During crisis, it is the weakest or the weaker ones that are hit the first, the children and the women. Yes, and I suppose that you also hope that this war that is currently being waged will come to an end as soon as possible. No, this is a mistake to think like that. And the Ukrainians put it the best way. They say that if we stop fighting, there will no longer be Ukraine. When the Russians will stop fighting, the war will come to an end. So there is a difference. The cannons should not fall silent at all costs tomorrow. This must be dictated by the Ukrainians when they feel that they no longer can either bear the civil victims, or they are unable to fight, or maybe they have achieved their goals. We don't know where this war will come to an end. It is very important to bear in mind that probably the Ukrainians will not do all the job that the world needs to do in order to protect the free democracy in the world. Yes, indeed, the regime might change after Ukraine wins or Russia wins. and we will continue living as we did 30 years ago, but probably this will not be the case. Hopefully, Ukraine will end the war when they have reached the situation where they feel safe enough compared to how things were on the 23rd of February, so that they are able to stand solidly on the ground. It doesn't mean that Russia is not responsible or the Western wealthy countries are not responsible, because responsibility will fall back on them. Currently, Ukraine is bearing the burden alone, but in addition to military warfare, it is also economic warfare. Currently, at many conferences, we are being asked what are the conditions for giving up sanctions, and I keep asking, why are we discussing that at all today? Probably the resolving of situation will not come to an end, and the baton will be handed back to us. And then it will indeed be very difficult to convince our societies to bear the economic burden in order to win the war for the democratic world. So I am afraid of this period even more than the period of war. Ukraine is the only one to make the decision as to what is the phase that this war will end in, and it does not mean that it will alleviate us from our responsibilities. Currently, it seems as if our voice is heard in the region, the voice of Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland. And what you were referring to is the concern whether the voice will be heard in the future as well. Yes, but we have all shouted on the top of our lungs so that Ukraine could approach the EU at the Munich Security Conference together with the Yalta and European strategy partners, myself and them. We raised the topic on the discussion table. So we have done a very loud voice. We have shouted on the top of our lungs, and we will continue to do that. When there will be the stage for restoration and reconstruction of Ukraine, there will certainly be many discussions about who can be isolated, who cannot, and how should we continue to live on. However, I think that we should now be able to make it clear for our allies and partners that it might be a very long-term process, maybe not shorter than the Cold War. How likely is it that Russia will change in the future? How optimistic or pessimistic are you? I think Russia had the same opportunities as we did in the beginning of the 90s. Very often, Russians tend to leave the impression that the Baltic states are really happy when the Russians are internationally not respected. I don't think that this is the biggest geopolitical disaster of the 20th century, quoting the classic authors here. Russia did not become a proper society, did not become a democratic society, and this is what the citizens of Russia suffer from. I think we should continue to support the Russian civil society as much as possible and be strategically very, very patient with what is going on. Yet I don't see any reason for the 140 million Russians not to want to live in a free and democratic state. Now, to end on a beautiful note, what is your favorite place in Estonia where you love to spend your holidays in or to relax in? Well, it depends on the purpose. If I want to go biking on roads, I go probably to southern Estonia. If I want to go fishing, I go to the island of Saaremaa. If I want to enjoy peace in forest, then I probably go to the southeastern corner of Setomaa. If I want to participate in adventure sport, I will go to the Viru county in the east of Estonia. So this is how it is. There are very many nice places in Estonia, no matter what you're doing. We have most theaters, theater halls in Tallinn. We have museums across Estonia. Everybody is very welcome to come and explore Estonia who haven't explored Estonia yet. Thank you very much, President Kersti Kaljulaid. Thank you very much. Thank you and welcome to Estonia.
Thank you very much to Kersti Kaljulaid for this interview, and I hope that you gained a lot of good ideas. So a few words about the two of the websites. Hopefully we can get them on the screen as well. First of all, we have Global Estonians. So if you do not know yet, then this is the cooperation of the Ministry of Culture, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and Integration Foundation. So this is an environment where you can find information about communities. So these are the Estonian communities across the world. So there is information about different events, there's some news, and so forth. So a newsletter is also sent to you. So this is both in Estonian and in English. And the second web portal or web news is the Estonian news, Estonian World. So it's a web publication. It's in English. And so this is Estonians, about Estonians through the global point of view. And today, virtual forum for Global Estonians is about to end. I would like to thank all of you who watched us, who followed us. And if you did not get answers to your questions, then as it was said before, then there is a newsletter. And then you get answers to your questions as well. So this newsletter is coming out on May 16th. I believe that you all found some good ideas. And you got answers to very practical questions as well. So Estonia is big. It's not Estonia which is physically here within these borders, but Estonia lives across the world. But before we end, have a great pleasure to welcome Mari Kalkun here again. So you had a song before called Somewhere There Is War, and what's your next song? This song, to conclude, is hopefully more positive with the language and with the mind. And the message is that it's the positive thinking which takes us further. One more question, because we heard President Kersti Kaljulaid talked about her favorite places in Estonia where she enjoys relaxation. What is your favorite place? It's a very good question, because I have one place where I know that I can always go there. And I find that this is the place where I relax, and this is the smoke sauna. For South Estonian, it's a holy place. So quite often with my concerts, we travel across the world, and sometimes to be on a tour, it takes quite a long time. And then afterwards, it feels really special to go to Võrumaa, to go to a smoke sauna and take a deep breath in, breathe out, and wash off the dust of the world. And then you can really feel that you are in direct connections with your roots and with your ancestors. Thank you very much. I would like to thank you all. I would like to thank all the speakers, performers, everybody who followed us. I would like to thank the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for organizing this virtual forum. Next one will take place as well. We do not know the date yet, but I'm sure we'll know more about it soon. And now, Mari Kalkun, please.
Seitsme ootamises silmavee. 8 kannatust. meren, elo meren, katsite puuvene. Mu veren, mino veren, su verekene mõts. Ime, maa, ese, lats, ilo, tii, niis, kodu, päiv, suu, taivas.